In today's biased news, Sweden gets the go-ahead from NATO. The US threatens Cuba and China with nuclear submarines. And Israeli settlers pretend they have a democracy. NATO has greenlit Sweden's accession after Turkey has finally conceded their vote. Originally, Turkish hesitation was based on societal issues, a lack of openness from the Swedish military industry to sell weapons to Turkey, as well as Swedish cooperation or protection of Kurdistan Workers' Party members, which Turkey considers to be a terrorist group. This change follows months of pressure from the US, which came in the form of limiting F-16 shipments, weapons deliveries, and upgrades. A few limp requests from Turkey included renewed consideration for their EU bid, which has been frozen since 2009 due to blocks by current EU members. Since Turkey's change of heart, the Hungarian Prime Minister's Chief of Staff stated that they would no longer block Sweden's NATO membership either. Ukraine's accession is still unlikely, particularly after Biden deemed it premature, stating, quote, "I don't think Ukraine is ready for membership in NATO. I don't think there is unanimity in NATO about whether or not to bring Ukraine into the NATO family now, at this moment, in the middle of a war." End quote. No official invitation was extended from NATO to Ukraine, nor a timetable for accession which Ukrainian President Zelensky has repeatedly demanded. In place of these benefits, Ukraine has received long-range cruise missiles from Britain and France, tripling the country's previous capabilities. Germany has also announced aid totaling 700 million euros, as well as Patriot air defense missile launchers, tanks, and other vehicles. The theater continues, all to maintain the geopolitical interest of the Western ruling class while working people are suffering from the worst cost of living crisis in decades. Meanwhile, Russia continues to wallow in post-Soviet stagnation as it cannibalizes the legacy of the USSR. There is no viable path for humanity and the environment aside from the socialist path and peace. Cuban authorities have accused the United States of deploying a nuclear-powered submarine at its military base in Guantanamo Bay, calling it a provocative escalation of tensions. The Cuban Foreign Ministry questioned the military reason behind the action in what it considers a peaceful region. The Cuban government has long called for the closure of the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay, along with the notorious torture facility. The statement from Cuba's foreign ministry also criticized the circulation of nuclear submarines and armed forces in the Caribbean, citing threats to sovereignty. While the exact motivations behind the submarine's movements remain uncertain, U.S. track record indicates that this is yet another instance of projecting power in China's sphere of influence. The U.S. recently made a baseless accusation that China had established a spy facility in Cuba, and is using the story to stir up more anti-China sentiment. Thousands of Israeli settlers disrupted traffic and blockaded the main airport and highways in opposition to a bill pushed by Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right coalition. The bill aims to limit the power of the Supreme Court, sparking deep divisions within the population. Critics argue that the bill threatens Israel's supposed democracy and weakens checks and balances, while supporters claim it curbs interventionist judges and promotes effective governance. The bill has faced opposition from the tech and business sectors, as well as military reservists. While the protests are being covered in Western media as healthy democratic frustration, it's important to remember that what is never shown on the news is the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. The entire Israeli state is built on war crimes, and will eventually implode under the weight of trying to maintain its foundational myths. China has carried out another day of military exercises, deploying Navy ships and a significant number of warplanes, including fighters and bombers, toward the island. The exercise involved nuclear-capable bombers and coordination with Chinese warships. These actions are in response to Taiwan's annual military drills and NATO summit, both intended to threaten China and maintain U.S. domination in the region. President Biden recently claimed that the U.S.'s 300-plus military bases around China are not intended to surround and strong-arm the country. It should be obvious to any rational observer that that is a lie. Continuing with China, the tech giant Huawei is planning a comeback to the 5G smartphone market by the end of the year. The company is expected to procure 5G chips domestically using its own semiconductor design tools. Huawei's consumer electronics business suffered a significant blow due to a US ban on equipment sales. The return to the 5G phone market would mark a victory for Huawei, which faced restrictions that cut its access to chip-making tools. Huawei had shipped over 240 million smartphones worldwide in 2019 before facing these challenges. The company's ability to compete internationally was hindered by restrictions on Google's Android operating system. And in positive news, on Tuesday, an Argentinian court sentenced 3 police officers to life imprisonment for the racially motivated killing of 17-year-old Lucas Gonzalez in November 2021. The victorious plaintiff's lawyer said, "We have never had convictions for institutional violence for racial hatred before. Hopefully this outcome marks the beginning of a better legal system, one that does not solely protect the powerful." That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. If you'd like to see more in-depth analysis episodes, let us know in the comments below, and support the show on Patreon so we can grow and expand.